Well, we're back. With the help of my helper, we managed to take all the pistons, bed plate, crank apart. I think in the last video I mentioned I was going to take the bed plate off, but no, that's not true. You take the pistons out first, or I did. It was just easier to keep them from flopping around so bad, keep the crank in place. So, over here is the bed plate. Zillion bolts in the bed plate, it seems like. But there's the bed plate taken off the block. And then here are the 8 pistons. And each one of them is, we've got them stuck down to a box with some holes in. Each one of them is numbered. And this is the not so grand piston that's causing a lot of this work to be done. We matched the yoke to the rod, as you see there. Put the yokes back on the rods and put them back in the correct direction. And so each one of them's intact. Right now you'll see the bearings still in place. But we'll worry about that later. I've got to get those pistons, wrist pins pressed out and new pistons put on later on. Also need to check that particular rod and make sure that it's not bent or messed up in any way. So we took off the journal bolts on the yoke and pulled the pistons, screwed them back together, kept them in order. Took out the journal plate, took out the bed plate, excuse me, and all those bolts, and then very slowly pried that bed plate off. Be really careful. You don't want to mess up your bed plate sealing surface all along here. As it is, I'm gonna have to scrape for a while just to get that surface clean. You certainly don't want to mess it up with scarring from a pry tool of any kind. Also pulled the rear seal off once the bed plate was off, and you can see there the target plate for the crankshaft position sensor. We'll take it off. It's got some, let's get around here. It's got some screws here in the face of it, and we'll check whatever kind of alignment marking we have, and we'll pull that off so we can take the crank in and get it checked. Right off, the bearing surfaces look good. We certainly need to have them checked out professionally, but I don't see anything that's a real problem. We're going to, I'll go ahead and set this crank out and flip the motor, and then we'll look at the bores. Before we flip it over, now that the crank's out, you can see here, this is the one of the 2 thrust washers. The other thrust washer is here on this side. Out of the 5 main bearing sections, the thrust washers sit on the central section, and so you can see them there. They come off quite readily. They're just sandwiched basically between the crank and the block. So there you go. Now we're going to flip it over and we'll take a look at the bores. Okay, so we flipped the block and we just wiped out the cylinder bores real quickly. And I'll tell you, if you haven't already noticed just how clean the inside of this motor is, there is no gunk buildup of any kind. This block was very well kept, and I think we're gonna benefit from that. This is the number 7 piston. If I was going to worry about, cylinder. If I was going to worry about any of them, I guess this would be the one I'd worry about the most, because this is the one that had impact. It looks great. They all look great. We're going to check. There's a little bit of surface rust occasionally, like here, but I don't think it's anything of significance. I think, certainly whenever we take it to the machinist, they're going to check it out and make sure that wear is within spec and it's not out of round or anything like that. But right now I'm pretty confident we're going to be in a good place. The other 4, they're down here, but they all look just as good. So I think we've got a really exceptional motor that should be a pretty easy rebuild from the standpoint of machine work. Have the decks checked, make sure they're true. I don't think at this point I'm going to have them line bore the crank unless we find out that there's some problem with it whenever they do their measurements. So, pretty thrilled. I guess from here you won't hear from us for a while because it's going to take a while to get this thing machined and get it back and get all the parts we need to put it back together. But we'll be back when the time's right, and we'll talk about what all had to be done to the block and take it from there. Well, thanks for watching.